guys, making a yeast starter today. We're actually making a double chocolate stout, which I may or may not have some videos up from, but just kind of want to show you how this works. If you've never bought yeast before, there's a manufacturer's date actually on the label. Check those. If you got a bum store owner, or if you're shopping somewhere you've never been before, they may have really old yeast. If it's coming up on a year old, maybe flip through, try to find a fresher one. You'll see what I'm talking about on there. It's not going to come up on the camera, and of course make sure you're buying the right yeast. It's very important. If you've never used a smack pack before, essentially what you have going on here is you have a bladder full of yeast nutrient solution, and then inside is a very small packet of actual yeast. So the idea is we're propagating a much larger colony of yeast that we can put into our beer to get a much fuller fermentation. So the first thing you want to do is locate the actual package inside of the solution. So in our case, it's going to be right about here. When I first got these, I was just like, oh, am I sure, is that it? Whatever. And I was afraid to really give it a good smack. I didn't want to pop this thing open. Don't be afraid to do that. You're not going to have any troubles. You can pretty much just whack away at it and nothing's going to happen. So ours is right there. I'm going to go ahead and set it down. Just smack it open. Give it a few squeezes. Make sure that it has broken open. Ours has. And you'll actually feel the yeast squirting out of that packet inside. Go ahead and give it a good shake. Just get all that stuff mixed together. And the idea is you're going to have the yeast starting to actively start to propagate itself inside of this solution, so you have a nice, healthy, actively fermenting starter for when you pitch this into your wort. So just go ahead and let this hang out at room temperature for about 3 hours. In our case, we're going to dinner. I suggest doing that. And yeah, we'll come back and we'll show you how to put together the starter. Okay, so if your smack pack is looking something like this, you're probably about ready to start your little baby wort for your yeast starter. And basically what you want to do that is going to be just a pot, about a half gallon of water. And I've kind of gone back and forth on with my friends on this. It's kind of like, what is a half gallon, which sounds like a really stupid thing, but seriously, like if you have 5 different people fill up a jug halfway, they're going to have to see 5 different ways. I'll just do this, or I'll just tip it straight to the side and you can see where it's half or whatever. So I'll just use half one of those. And then I just started using this extra light dry malt extract, which my other friends have talked about it too, and I hate the idea of putting any kind of malt extract into my beers at all, anywhere, any stage of the game. But for these starters, especially if you're going to decant off the wort on top of the yeast, it doesn't really matter. And just to show you guys what I was talking about before, we got a couple of these in the fridge. Sorry, fiance. But basically, after the lauter tun is done running and we got all our beer that we need or all our wort that we need for a boil kettle, I'll just fill these jugs up. And then when the beer's done fermenting, I'll grab some yeast off the bottom of that and propagate cultures off of that. But in this case, unfortunately, I somehow lost my London Ale culture. I just must have forgotten to make one at some point, so we have to make a new one. So no wort available, so you guys get to see how to make a starter. Basically, we're just going to bring a half gallon or so of water to a boil. We're going to mix in some dry malt extract, cool it down. Some guys like to use growlers even. Some guys like to use 750 bottles. I'm just going to use these milk jugs. I don't even bother with an airlock and all that stuff, and I'll show you that at the end. But basically, get your water boiling, get your malt extract in there, and for right now, we're going to go ahead and fill this with some iodophor and water. And of course, you want to keep everything nice and sanitary when you're dealing with yeast. Otherwise, you will get some off flavors, you'll get some fungus, you'll get some mold, you'll get some whatever, another yeast strain maybe. It's important that everything is completely sanitary as much as possible anyway, and also you're probably going to want a funnel. So at this point in the game, we're going to get our culture vessel sanitized, and then before we open this yeast smack pack too, we're going to go ahead and sanitize that, and we'll come back when it's time to add the malt to the boiling water. Okay, so here we go. We got our wort boiling, or our boiling water boiling I should say, that we're turning into wort. We're going ahead and just whisking in this dried malt extract. I got about half a pound here for half a gallon. A lot of guys take specific gravity readings on this, and they get real well specific as to what exactly they're putting together. I'm not going to do that. I'll show you guys what one of my finished yeast cultures look like, and when you got that much yeast staring you back in the face, I don't really give a shit exactly how many cells it is, to be blunt. So basically what's going on here is we're just making a very simple beer. Some folks go ahead and actually add hops to this. And the idea is that, of course, you're not going to be drinking this exactly. You certainly could. You can add all this to your beer and then end up consuming it in the end. But the guys are actually doing that because when the yeast is growing in an acidic environment, of course, hops are acidic. There's a very small change between this environment and when the beer actually, or when the yeast is pitched into your final wort that you're going to end up with for your beer. So you can get as elaborate as you want to when you're making these starter cultures. I mean, you could basically make an exact clone of your beer, you know, if you wanted to, and start the yeast that way. But it certainly isn't exactly necessary. And this is where you start getting into the pseudoscience stuff, where guys will tell you what's life and death and what isn't. And then you kind of find out it isn't exactly what you feel the need to do, and your beer still come out fine, and blah, blah, blah. I'm sure you guys know where I'm going with this. One thing I will point out right now, though, is keeping my burner pretty darn low for this part, because just like with your final wort, this does boil over very easily. So just be aware of that coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and whisk in the last bit of this. We'll let it boil off for a little while. Again, I'm not actually adding hops to this. The beer we're making too is especially unhoppy. There's literally, I think, about just over an ounce of hops in the whole thing. We're making that double chocolate stout. So I'm going to cut this tape for now, and then when we come back, I'll show you how to chill this down, and then we'll get the yeast inside. Okay, so here we are. We've been boiling about 15 minutes. That's good enough for me. I'm going to go ahead and kill the heat on our wort here, and I'm going to toss this pan into the sink. And thanks to Rachel Ray, I don't have to worry about burning my hands, because she rubberized the handles. So we're going to throw this lid up on top of our little saucepan. Start filling the sink up with cold water. I have some ice cubes and an ice cube tray, which I pre-cracked, because I knew I'd be doing this with one hand. This is what guys call the ice bath. And essentially what we're doing is we're just rapidly dropping the temperature of our wort. And the idea is we want to cool this down and get a yeast strain into it that we want to have before a yeast strain we don't want to have inoculates that wort. So we're going to leave the lid on, we're going to let it cool down, and once that's chilled, we're going to go ahead and pitch the yeast into it. Just one thing I'll show you. Like I said, you know, I didn't show it, but we're actually we filled this entire thing up with iodophor and water. You know, you want the iodophor touching all the surfaces on the inside, so there's nothing in there that we didn't want to have. And then I also went ahead and I just got a mixing bowl and I threw my whisk into it after I rinsed it off. We got this funnel that we're going to be using, and also I'm going to dip my thermometer in there. We're going to check the temperature of the wort before we pitch the yeast into it. We're looking for anything under 70 degrees. So the idea is I'm going to go ahead and dump this iodophor into that mixing bowl, and then I'll have plenty of stuff to sanitize my equipment with. And then lastly, I just wanted to show you, this is a completed yeast culture that I made a few weeks ago for this Pilsner Urquell that I made. And it looks through the viewfinder like it's probably kind of hard to see the yeast bed. Maybe if I get down a little bit lower, but you can clearly see this line about a ½ inch from the bottom spreading all over the bottom. That is, you can see it kind of here, that is all yeast. I mean, that's just solid yeast. And then, turn this water off. What I was talking about is some guys will actually dump this wort off the top. They'll leave this in the fridge, and the yeast will all set them on the bottom like this. This just came out of my fridge. They'll dump this wort off the top, or decant it if you want to be more formal or whatever, and then just kind of swirl up this yeast and then just dump that into your wort, so you're not really altering the flavor of your final product. I mean, if you are dumping in a ½ gallon or a gallon of wort into a beer and the beer's only 5 gallons, I mean, you can be changing, you know, 20 to 10% of your overall volume, so that might radically change the taste of your beer, just so you're aware of that. And then also, like I said too, it's important that we will sanitize the outside of this yeast package before we pitch the yeast in, and we'll come back for all that stuff.